Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Chicago Justice Show. I am your host, Tracy Siska. I'm also the executive director of the Chicago Justice Project. You can find out more about what CJP does at chicagojustice.org. Like a report that we republished a week from Tuesday that is incredibly even more relevant today than it was then, believe it or not. It's an analysis of 20 years of agenda items from the Chicago City Council Committee on Public Safety. Go read it and look how useless that organization has been. Why is that relevant today? Well, this afternoon, in a blow to, real reform, in a heightened state of where the mayor is impotent and the committee, the city... The Committee on Public Safety just totally impotent, incompetent, inept, and doesn't want change. They're happy, they're fine, they don't care about police beating people and killing people, especially of color. They're actually very pro-it. They had a chance this morning to vote either on the mayor's version of the community commission, which was weak and useless for the most part in my view, or the community's commission, what is called consensus between GAPA and CPAC. And what happened? They ended up pulling both ordinances. They didn't have the votes because of a maneuver by an alderman that is loyal to the mayor and also an extreme police supporter no matter what they do. He sponsored a few years back the Blue Lives Ordinance, which came after the murder of Laquan McDonald in cold blood and the cover-up. That was the perfect time to sponsor an ordinance saying we don't support the police enough after they get caught murdering a young black man again. Okay. Yes, that happened today. No, we are not going to cover it because that's what we do here. We want to be patient and see how the coverage unfolds so we can talk both about the incident and the coverage. So Monday, it'll be our main segment. Today, we are going to talk about, in our main segment, the second special prosecutor being appointed to investigate the Foxx Cook County State's Attorney's Office. It's a little different this time because this misconduct started back in the late 1980s related to Burge. Yes, it did. You're not going to believe it. Also on the show, we talk about the CPD arresting the wrong people for gun violence. A shooting in Chicago where 8 people were shot. It looked like methodically in the head. Multiple deaths. Gun violence prevention rally. Then after the break, we're going to talk about police departments refusing to open the use of force data. We're going to talk about some other stuff too, but that's basically the crux of what's coming up in today's show. But before we talk about it, we're going to talk about our nation program, cjpnation.org, and you will get to this website, which is our Nation Builder website. Our Nation program, the volunteers on our Nation program, did all the grunt work that was responsible for digging up all those agenda items over 20 years. From Committee on Public Safety, you can get involved in crowdsourced research projects like that, social media activism, public policy advocacy, all of those things. We meet every Wednesday or every other Wednesday night now virtually through Zoom. If you want more you've got more information about the projects we're being working on, who's involved, who's leading them, go to cjpnation.org and find out more information. And you can actually contact Sydney, who's leading the Nation, and some of the group leads there also have contact information if you got questions. So go there, sign up, register, get involved, make a difference. We have probably... Right now, through all our projects, we probably have about 75 individuals working through the Nation on all our projects. So we got some exciting publishing coming in it's the 18th. Roughly about 2 weeks. We have 2.5 weeks. We got some new research coming out. We're going to hit every few weeks with some new research. So let's get on to our main segment. Judge is appointing, so it's a Tribune article, but basically, that's the article we're showing, but let me read it for our podcast audience. Judge will appoint special prosecutor probe conduct of Cook County State's Attorney's Office in Burge-related case that imploded at trial last year. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to rehash the whole thing, but this is Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson and his brother Jackie were convicted in the late 80s, I believe, of murdering 2 Chicago police officers. It was kind of accepted fact that Jackie was physically tortured. It turns out Andrew seems to have been also physically abused, if not worse, to get them to confess by John Burge, a famous cop. If you're interested, go to Chicago Reader and look up, or just put into Google, John Conroy Torture Archive. He is the man and the only person you should read on the John Burge saga era. His reporting was really unprecedented. It still stands, as far as I'm concerned, is some of the best, if not the best, reporting in Chicago in the history of Chicago. But you can get all the information there. I'm not going to retread everything that Burge is alleged to have done. But Andrew Wilson, through all these twists and turns, got a new trial eventually through the Torture Relief Commission. And his brother Jackie's long since died now. He got a new trial. In the trial, a state's attorney that worked on the case has to admit that he not only knows where this jailhouse informant, but no one can get in touch with witnesses, but that he's actually friends with him and has been friends with him since the late 80s, even though he prosecuted him for crimes and convicted him. He's been friends with him since the late 80s. And he was just in contact with him in the last week. And then the big bombshell that came out, he was asked if he ever discussed this witness with the special prosecutor or the state's attorney's office, and he said no. At that point, he was taken off the stand, and the jury was put into another room, and the prosecutors had to come out, and special prosecutor had to come out and say, that's not true. We did discuss this guy with him. And that was it. That was all that was needed to end the trial and throw out the case and throw out the charges, and Andrew Wilson is now free. Like I've told many people, and this goes the same thing for police misconduct and criminal trials. Just because you're found not guilty does not mean you are innocent. Those are two different things. It can, but it doesn't mean it. In this Andrew Wilson case, it doesn't mean it either. You mean he didn't shoot the guy? I don't think this is what that says. But what it does say is you can't torture people for confessions. And you can't lie and hide witnesses, and everything they've done throughout the years is just despicable. Now, where does this connect to the prosecutor's office? So Wilson's attorneys were trying to get the personnel file of a prosecutor, and I think it's Turkinen, something like that. And excuse me for not having it off the top of my head with everything that went on today with the Community Commission. That name is have left me. Turkinen. They tried to get his personnel file, and the state's attorney's office kept not releasing it. And in there was a recent, within the last couple of years, I believe, complaint by a witness that they were threatened and intimidated by the prosecutor. And Turkinen, I believe, was in some degree disciplined by the state's attorney's office for having actually done that. Oopsies. Yeah. And the state's attorney's office did everything they could to hide that. Now, let's get to the headlines and what's going on when they say Foxx to investigate Foxx. It could be that Foxx knew about hiding this letter. It could be that Foxx was involved in that. Kim Foxx, the state's attorney. It also could be that she had no idea. So connecting it right to Foxx, and I want to say that the other special prosecutor, because this is the second one, is related to the Jesse Smollett case, and that I do believe to some degree is looking right at Foxx's decisions and what she did internally in the office, but her actions are part of it, and we know it right from the start. That seems more legitimate to pin it like that's this special prosecutor is looking at Foxx, and I agree with that somehow. But I don't think there's facts and evidence to say that this one is exactly looking at Foxx. Is it looking at her office? Absolutely. Now, Turkinen, if I got the dates right, it's right around when Daley took office, or Daley ran for mayor and won. We got to find out the specific dates of when Turkinen stepped into the Wilson case, which was in 1989. But that's when Daley won the mayor's office, and Daley was definitely overseeing this guy at some point. And it went through like Cecil Partine, I think Jack McDowell or Jack something like that. Then it went to Dick Devine, Daley's number 2 at the time. when Daley ran the state's attorney's office, and then it went to Anita Alvarez. So for a very long time, this was the old guard of Cook County corrupt, horrific prosecutors. I'm not trying to absolve Foxx. I'm just not sure how much of her involvement is really legitimate. And maybe the investigation will uncover that, but I just don't think we have facts and evidence. Now, it could be someone high up in the office did hide that letter on purpose, and if that's so, they should be punished. And if it was Foxx, she should get the heat for it. I'm 100% for that. I just don't think it's there. I just think this is prosecutors. I mean, I think newspaper people writing headlines that get clicks. And because a lot of them just don't like the police, they just don't like Foxx's reform efforts, that they're trying to pin it to her. I don't think they would have done this to Anita Alvarez. I don't think they would have done this to Dick Devine or the other prosecutor, Jack McDowell, but I don't think that's the right name, between or Partee or Daley. I don't think they would have done that to him. I think this is especially, they're trying to tarnish Foxx as much as possible. Certainly from the cops, that's what's going on. But remember, if Foxx is covering up something, it's actually covering up stuff that the cops probably agree with. And they certainly backed Burge to the end. So how much Foxx knew in all of this is very, very questionable. So I question the headline writing. But I do agree there's a special prosecutor. But I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, for what even the Foxx, Jesse Smollett special prosecutor, that crapola. And I do think Foxx screwed up major in there. What a joke. It's a joke. Special prosecutor. How about a special prosecutor looking at Anita Alvarez for covering up Daley's nephew's murder? Could you imagine the other things she covered up? And Dick Devine? Dick Devine going from death row place to death row place to death row place around Illinois. Once, God, I can see his name. In a Burge case, the cops had to eventually, in a rehearing of his case, the cops were going to be forced to testify about possible torture. The judge had ordered it. Dick Devine's like, oh no, we're going to stop that. We're not going to let these cops get on the record about torture. So he went around on everyone on death row and tried to make deals. So he could avoid, all the Burge victims, he could avoid having to get that uncovered. He didn't want that. How about a special prosecutor for that? So I do think the Smollett thing's much about nothing, although I do think she screwed up some. This one, it seems more serious than Smollett, but I'm just not sure it's going to reach to Foxx. And there certainly isn't facts and evidence to say it will be. Okay, we're going to move to our second story. It's also a Foxx story, except the flip side, and this is what the cops hate. Especially, it's a very interesting story, and I think it's 100%. I haven't looked at the data yet. I have it. It's on our computer, and I'll look at it and do a story in the next week or two. But this is a story by Chip Mitchell, and the headline reads, Kim Foxx's office says CPD's arresting the wrong people to curb gun violence. All I can say is hallelujah. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, the police department, the police department, they have their own own internal incentives. Yes, they do. And boy, do you get a gold star if you get a gun. Boy, do you get a gold star if you make an arrest for a gun. What this article details and what Foxx is talking about from what the article says, I'll go more into it in the next week or two, what they actually said in this, Foxx's office did a webinar of sorts for journalists in Chicago about how to use the data on their website for to uncover, what's going on with guns in Chicago. Now, so what happens? Let me just lay this basis for you. Prior to Foxx taking office, it has been a widely known fact throughout Cook County that judges set low bails or no bails for offenders arrested with gun possession, which is called unlawful use of a weapon because it's a propaganda term. They're not really using it. for illegal possession of a firearm. What does that mean? It means you get caught with a gun on your person or in your car and you do not have a FOID card, a fire owner's identification card. You haven't used it. There's no sign that you're going to use it. You just get caught with the gun. Prior to Foxx, those arrests, they weren't low, but they weren't sky high. And it wasn't the corrupt, utter, disgusting mayors, Rahm Emanuel, and now unfortunately Lori Lightfoot's in the wagon right next to Rahm with this, and Brown especially, McCarthy and now Brown. Eddie Johnson was the same way, actually. They're all in there together, trying to push in the media's eyes and in the public eyes that illegally possessing a gun is a violent felony. You shouldn't get bail and you should have to sit in jail till your court date. This is because the police department is incapable, for a variety of reasons, incapable, I repeat, incapable of preventing most gun violence. Oh my God, that isn't anti-police. That's just the truth. And many cops know that. Right? That is a reality. And the mayors know that. So they want to use whatever tactics they can to keep people off the street for as long as they possibly can. Because it's really the only tool they've got down the criminal justice system path. They have other tools. Stop using TIF money to fund the rich white people to build more buildings and use it to develop communities on the South and West Side. But no one wants to do that, including Lightfoot. So they have been pushing violent offenses. So the CPD, because your actions at work go to what you measure, they have been pushing, arrest everyone with a gun you can possibly can. Just get a gun. And the number of arrests have skyrocketed for gun possession. Skyrocketed. Okay, here's a quote from the article. 1,400 people arrested by Chicago police who have no prior convictions but are caught illegally carrying a gun. The evidence doesn't show that the drivers of violence are the people who've been arrested for non-violent gun offenses. Of course they are. Everyone with a gun is violent. Have to be. Make them sit in jail 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. We don't care. Just lock them up. That's what Brown's case is. Now, Brown's a liar. A massive, unprecedented. He can't stop but lie. And unfortunately, this is what he did in Dallas, and Mayor Lightfoot somehow overlooked that or didn't care as long as he lied about her points, and this is what he's doing here. Right? The police department is hunting guns, not criminals. Not the people driving the violence. And, William Bratton, I have big problems with, but when he was the New York police superintendent and McCarthy was in Chicago, McCarthy was bragging about how that Chicago takes more guns off the street than New York, and Bratton said, we don't go after guns, we go after criminals. We go after offenders. We're not concerned about the actual gun itself. So, here's more from the article. CPD gun arrests have nearly doubled since 2014. The increase is mainly due to arrests for gun possession, a crime that Foxx's office deems nonviolent because the gun is not used or fired. I continue. Have no idea if that person who possesses this is from Matthew Saney, who, by the way, we're suing Foxx, by the way, for ladies and gentlemen. You can go to our office and see that. So we are not Foxx lovers, and we are not a lover of Matthew Saney, the chief data officer. We have no idea if that person who possesses a gun has any intention of using that gun in an illegal way beyond possessing it, or if they are going to create violence with it. That's right, and neither do the police. Though the policeman said is everyone with a gun is automatically a violent offender. And by the way, do you love this line? A crime that Foxx's office deems nonviolent. Not Foxx's office. Buddy, I think this is Chip Mitchell. Hey, Chip. All of the criminal justice system, the entire criminology field. You know why? Because there's no violence. Look up the Uniform Crime Report codes, my friend. Gun possession is not a violent offense. Type 1, Uniform Crime Reports. In the violent crimes, where, my friend, is gun possession? It isn't. It hasn't been from the 1930s and it isn't now. It isn't a violent offense. You haven't done anything violent. How is possessing something in my pocket a violent offense? He's making it seem like Foxx deems it that way. They've had that way for 100 years, my friend. That's bad reporting. But these are, most of these people are just hacks. That's why you get bad reporting like that. Lightfoot and Brown, no, they can read minds. Right? This is what they're saying. They know these people. Catanzaro, the FOP president. I continue with the article. From 2011 to 2016, those arrests never exceeded 300 a year. 300 a year, ladies and gentlemen, during Rahm Emanuel and Gary McCarthy's term. Okay? By 2020, there were more than 1,400, and Saney said CPD is on pace to exceed that number this year. That's almost a five times increase. An increase of 5 times. And they're going to beat that this year if they stay on the path they are. Mass arrest. This is the dumbest policing in the history of the world. Okay, let's continue. CPD arrest numbers for violent gun crimes, meantime, have trended down over the years, according to the presentation. So has the rate at which CPD solves shootings. Wait a minute. Shootings are going up. Homicides are going up. You mean they're arresting less people for violent crimes with guns? What the hell is going on? How is that good policing? The rate at which CPD solves shootings has gone down. What the hell are they doing? What the hell are they doing? How is this good? Brown should be fired. Lightfoot may be recalled. You've got to be kidding me. A 5-fold increase in arrests for gun possession. At the same time, the rate at which you solve shootings and homicides goes down. What the hell is going on here? Talk about an absolutely broken department. Let's go on. Saney even criticized CPD efforts to seize guns, efforts that have netted 11,343 firearms in 2020 and 5,148 this year up to Friday, according to the department. This is Saney now. It's a pretty staggering number, Saney said, but less than 20% of those guns ever get linked back to any type of shooting. What is going on? What is going on? It's 2021, ladies and gentlemen. We can't use data to figure out what the hell the department should be doing. Is someone in the department looking at those numbers and saying, wow, we're doing a great job? Someone should get Lightfoot on the record. Is this what you want? Is this what you want? Last one. Those are conversions. This is the police now. Those are conversations he's had, this superintendent of police. He's had with the state's attorney privately and confidentially, Tom Ahern, husband of Marianne Ahern at Channel 5. So if you see her retweet his stuff, remember she's retweeting a flack from the police department. I can tell you what the superintendent, I can't tell you what the superintendent is thinking. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. I can tell you what he's thinking. We can't solve homicides. We're too incompetent. The department's too broke. So what we can do is arrest many people as humanly possible with guns. And so drive those numbers up so I can brag about them, because the public and the media are too stupid to realize those numbers don't have anything to do with who's actually committing gun violence. That's unbelievable. Now everyone, the police, the superintendent, the mayor, right, they're all harping. The FOP president, they're all harping about it. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God, what? You suck. That's what oh my God is. You guys suck. That is a sign of an absolutely unprecedentedly broken department. Now, what Brown and Catanzaro and Lightfoot are going to say, well, if you get these guns off the street, that's a future crime that we stopped. Well, you're not stopping it. Gun violence is going up. Your rate at solving shootings is plummeted. What the hell are you preventing? Are you kidding me? Shouldn't you be concentrating on the people that are actually using guns to shoot? It's really mind-blowingly bad. Brown should be gone. Fired. Gone. He should be on the pavement. Send him back to Dallas. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there's our next segment. It is a CBS 2 news story. We're just going to look at the headline, though. I'm not going to play the article. 8 people shot, 4 fatally after argument at gathering in Inglewood. Yeah, this is a horrific story. Let me just start there. Massive tragedy. Most of the people were shot in the head methodically. The latest reporting shows. But, you have to be careful about these things. Shootings, there are very few, if any, shootings of any age person, any type of violent crime with an age of a person, of any age, that could happen in Chicago and actually not have already occurred. We've seen it all over the past 30 or 40 or 50 years, 100 years. What you have to do, what these journalists should be doing but aren't, almost never do they do this. You should be, it's your job to put what is going on in context. Not to condone it, but not report something as if it's never happened. To be ahistorical, to not have the context. This is what's happened with that crappy article. I think I talked about it on Monday or last week when we talked about, oh my God, the rates of children being killed is going up, and Mary Mitchell's horseshit column about how I had to have my daughter's or granddaughter's birthday party in the suburbs because it's not even safe in the loop. No. Ahistorical. This is the worst time ever. No, it's not even close. Not even close, ladies and gentlemen, not even close. Does it mean it's good? No. Right? It doesn't. But you have to have some perspective. I would say 5, maybe 7 years ago, something like that, Vice News did a story. My dog wants to get in on the action here. Vice News did a story about how there was gun violence in low-rise public housing, just south of Roosevelt, between like Loomis and Laughlin. And they said, oh my God, it's the highest crime rate neighborhood. And, oh my God, the shootings are unbelievable. And the police should be doing a better job, and they're not, and it's unbelievable. And it was a real horrible thing. And the kid got a gun, who didn't have a gun. He got a gun for the cameras and then later was shot. Right? That was the worst shootings that ever been, blah, blah, blah. And there were a number of shootings over a couple year period in those houses, but it was tied to parties and things. But that wasn't the worst that Chicago's seen. It wasn't the worst of even indoor shootings that people had seen. It's just ahistorical, and this is what's going on now. It's all ahistorical reporting. All right, we're going to take a break. Hopefully I'll calm my dog down here a little bit, and then we'll be right back in a minute. Join a group of engaged and committed individuals advocating for transparency and accountability in the local justice system around the country. Get engaged through crowdsourced research projects, digital activism, public policy advocacy, or become a social media ambassador. Our criminal justice system will not reform itself. Communities must demand it. Transparency can be the fuel for justice our local communities need to combat the weaponizing of data by our justice system. Transformation of our justice system cannot occur until we know exactly what they are doing and who they are doing it to. Get involved today. CJP Nation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. In this story, once again, ahistorical, but also just shows you how just useless the city is and how minor their, what's the word for it here? How minor their attempts at nonviolence or funding anti-violence efforts really are. How absolutely impotent and useless they are. If you're looking for long-term sustained things, it really is really pretty bad. So whatever. Let me get the article itself is from the Sun-Times. It's about a rally held by Chicago Creed, CP4P, Communities Partnering for Peace, and Ready Chicago, which is a project of, oh boy, I've got it in my head, but I can't think of it, but if it comes to me, I will let you know. Anyways, they all do anti-violence work. Similar, but a little different from each other. And they're talking about they had this big thing and they're going to concentrate efforts in North Lawndale, where there's been a lot of shootings lately. So, let's look real quick at a quote. Norman Kerr, the director of violence reduction for the city, said Chicago was spending less than $1 million a year on violence reduction 3 years ago. The city is spending about $30 million this year. Wow. Now, if you're talking in these underserved communities, you're spending $30 million, 30, ladies and gentlemen, that seems really good. Wow, 30-time increase. That's great. You think about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that live in these underserved communities. Think about what $33 million is going to do. Will the increase help? It sure will a little bit. It sure will. Was it going to make sustained differences in these communities? Not a chance in hell. Not a chance in a hell. That is a drop in the bucket of what is needed. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, TIFs in Chicago in 2019 Tax Union Finance Program that filters money from the general fund of the city, the budget, the pie that we get to split up into funding public services, collected $929 million in 2019. Almost $1 billion was siphoned off out of the general fund for a slush fund to do what the mayor and some aldermen want. So a lot of the cranes you see in the Loop, South Loop, West Loop, Fulton Market, those are paid for by tax dollars. Remember that when you think of, oh my God, we went from $1 million to $30 million. Yay! Really? So she took $929 million to fund building rich white people, building buildings for rich white people, and she tossed a little change, pocket change, to the communities on the south and west side of $30 million, which is great. But what is that compared to $929 million? What's the difference? I mean, all Lightfoot did here is give a little more spare change to communities so she could say, look how much better we are than Ram. It's going to make a difference? No. Here's a quote. Our families are struggling with mental health issues, lack of access to health care, and the weight of systemic racism, and it does lead to poor choices and poor environments, says Palmer Barr, who is the executive director of the North Lawndale Employment Network. So it's much more complicated, much more sophisticated of an issue than just simply giving people a job. She's right. But remember, that $30 million isn't going into North Lawndale. That $30 million is covering all of the south and west sides in the areas of the north side that are having issues with violence. A drop and a drop and a drop of a bucket. Now, when I'm talking about CP4P and Ready Chicago and Chicago Cred, they do great work. But the reality is we need to run them out of a job, and we won't with $30 million. We'll just fund their work slightly more. It's awesome, not a solution. It's a slightly bigger Band-Aid that Lightfoot can propagandize on. That's it. If they turned all the money they did for cranes in a year into the south and west sides or into a couple communities, just for a one-year test, you're going to see massive change. But no one wants to do that. Lightfoot, progressive, change communities, racism, LGBTQ rights, all this stuff. Yay, yay, yay. What has she done on TIFs? Nothing. Nothing. Total absent. Totally absent. Total zero. Nothing better. Nothing different than Daily Ram. Nothing. Vote for change. Holy carapola, is this not change? So, we, CJP, had Eddie Bocanegra from senior director, who's a senior director of Ready Chicago, Vaughn Bryan, executive director of Communities Partnering for Peace, or CP4P, and Peter Cunningham, communications consultant for Chicago Cred, on the CJP show. They appeared, I believe, on February 21st of this year to talk about their work. And we got on the subject about the most pressing problems facing underserved communities on the south and west side. And I'm going to play their responses, and then I'll be back with you after that. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here. What are the top three most pressing social problems that the communities and individuals your organizations deal with are facing, if you had to rank them? And anyone can jump in.
I'll give you one.
Okay.
I think that the years of systemic oppression is probably the biggest contextual thing in my mind, because if we're just talking Chicago and we want to make it the most recent, if you look at the history of redlining in our city and the inability for mostly black but also brown people to not be able to benefit from one of the largest wealth generating mechanisms in the world, in the country at least, and for the United States, that has a generational effect in terms of accumulating wealth and then sustaining neighborhoods, attracting businesses, driving out poverty. It has an impact on education attainment. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say in terms of getting to the root.
As a matter of fact, I want to just contextualize something of what Vaughn has mentioned, right? Through Ready, we have a very small sample of individuals that we've been serving. So we've served roughly about 1,200 men through engagement of street outreach, but close to 700 of them, 680 so men, have taken advantage of the job and the CBT, some additional services along the way. But just to kind of give you a snapshot into what Vaughn is also pointing out here. So through police data and hospital data, we know that on average, our men in our program have 17 to 18 arrests. We know that 60% of them have done prison time. We know that over 80% of them have been victims of violence. Either they've been stabbed, shot, or assaulted. As a matter of fact, we talk about violence prevention, but ultimately, a lot of the men that we all work with here have been victims of violence, generally speaking. In Greater Chicago, we have had about 240 men out of the close to 680 men that I mentioned. They've been victims of shootings. They're survivors of gun violence. So that's 1/3 of the people that we serve. So again, building on what Vaughn just mentioned, I think about, one of the challenges for us is understanding that the oppression, the systemic challenges that we face today have been inherited, right, for many generations. And what we're seeing right now is a byproduct, right, of disinvestment, of lack of opportunity and access. So for your average listener who might say, well, so much money is going into violence prevention efforts, that is true, but there's way much more money going into punitive approaches as opposed to caring for people and fully grasping the fact that you are dealing with families who've been impacted by violence. You are dealing with families who have been separated because of the criminal justice system. To take, for example, the war on drugs. And there's other examples that I could give around that, right? But ultimately, our communities that we're working in right now, there's lack of opportunity for access of employment. There's actually lack of opportunities for upward mobility. We're seeing more and more residents in these communities leaving our city, which to me means also less taxpayers' dollars going into the system to support these kind of services as well. So again, there's a lot that could be deconstructed here, but I think that for your average audience, they have to understand that it's not just about telling someone to put their gun down or providing a program for them, right? I heard Vaughn said this before. We're not going to be able to program our way out of the situation. There has to be implications around policy changes, removing stigmas and barriers, and really meeting the people where they're at and building from that point on.
Yeah, one of the ways we often talk about this is that we see it as a public health problem, not a crime problem. And as long as we see it only as a crime problem, we're going to continue to approach it the same way, which is to try and arrest our way out of the problem. And that hasn't worked, and it's not going to work. But what does work is when you start to look at all those root causes, as Vaughn mentioned, the structural racism that has denied wealth building opportunities in the African American community. It's denied entrepreneurship opportunities. It's resulted in less housing opportunities. It results in worse public health outcomes, actual health outcomes. There's so many implications of it. And when you really embrace all of those dimensions of an unhealthy community, you begin to understand why gun violence emerges as an outcome. And that's kind of the way more and more we're thinking about this. It's a public health issue.
Okay. So, even those organizations know that what they're doing is like crisis response, more or less. And that the real solution is solving the crisis from the start. Changing the social circumstances of those communities. People will say, well, Tracy, you just don't think they're doing good work? No, they do great work. It just is never going to be the solution. There's an endless amount of people needing those services of those organizations. The goal is to stop it, change the circumstances that are creating that never-ending train of people that need their services. That's what we need to do. The challenge is multifaceted at every level. No small response will suffice. 30 million is a huge response compared to 1 million. Compared to what really is needed, it's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket. Will it make possibly change in a few people's lives? Sure will. Is it meaningfully going to dent the gun violence issues that Chicago has and issues with violence and crimes and gangs, drugs, mental health? Absolutely not. It's never intended to. You know what would? $929 million a year. That sure would change those communities. You got to have the will and the guts to make those changes. Lightfoot pretended that was her. Just like every other politician in Chicago has for an eternity. Slight changes, but in reality, no difference. So let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is, here we go, let me show you here. For a second year, most U.S. police departments declined to share information on their use of force. And I believe this is a Washington Post article. It is. Okay, I thought I cut it off, but it is not. Wow, are you not surprised, ladies and gentlemen? Are you not surprised? I mean, come on. Why wouldn't police want to share their use of force data? Here is a quote. Despite a presidential order, congressional demands, and a proposed new law requiring police to tell the FBI how often officers use force, for the second straight year, only about 27% of police departments have supplied data to the National Use of Force Data Collection Program, launched in 2019. I am shocked, ladies and gentlemen. I tell you, I am completely shocked that the police departments are not going to willingly give up data to show how much they abuse their citizens, the public. I mean, aren't you shocked about that reality? Okay. Second, now understand, ladies and gentlemen, because the separation of church and state, the FBI, what the FBI can mandate and the feds mandate that local police departments do is complicated, to say the least. Pepper's getting into it again. It's complicated. Now, they could just attach it mandatory to highway funding or some other funding they give the states, right? No doubt about it. You got to have the will, ladies and gentlemen, the will. They will not do this on their own. Here's another quote. The FBI launched a national task force to study collecting such data in 2016, conducting a pilot program in 2017, and opened up full program to both local police and federal law enforcement agencies in 2019. To participate, individual departments visit an FBI data portal each month and fill in the data for fatalities or injuries caused by police use of force and for police discharges of firearms at people. Legislation, not policy. It must be mandated in legislation. These agencies are not going to do it. It just isn't in their interest, ladies and gentlemen, to do it. And in fact, it is exactly against their interests. Right? They don't even like reporting, and they don't report that much regularly. Just their crime incident data and arrest data to the uniform crime reports. because they know journalists and researchers like me will use it and compare city to city, and they don't like that. So do you think they're going to do the same thing with their use of force data? You got to be out of your mind. Here's the head of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Somehow the chief of Buffalo Grove, a suburb in Chicago, which isn't very big, is the head of that, which is amazing to me. Maybe no one wants the gig. I don't know why a police department that's so small as chief of police would be the head of it, but hey, who knows? Here's a quote from him in the article. Of course it's from Illinois. "I don't get it," said Chief Stephen Cass Stevens of Buffalo Grove, Illinois, a police department and a recent president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. He's the chief of the Buffalo Grove Police Department, right? And International Association of Chiefs of Police. "I heard excuses, but not good reasons. Every statistician will tell you if we only have 50%, then your data is worthless." They don't care, and you know it. That's a total bullshit statement. He knows they don't care. Why does any police department care whether or not the researchers can use their data against them? Why would they do that? I don't understand to me that's a total BS statement, probably written by the International Association of Chiefs of Police for him. Totally crapola. They don't like oversight. They don't want anything to do with oversight. That's it, period, end of story, done. This thing is never going to take off unless it's mandated in legislation. They must report. There were some complaints. Art Acevedo, former Houston superintendent, almost came to Chicago, is now the Miami police chief, and he says reporting is cumbersome, transferring data is very hard. It's not easy from their system to the FBI system. The feds could easily fund someone in big police departments to just do the data conversion for them. The FBI could probably set up an office and do it themselves. This is literally, the people who are overseeing the public don't want any part of having the public oversee them. They're all for democracy as it gets to you having to listen to them and obey the laws that they tell you that you have to obey. But God forbid, they don't want you holding them accountable. That's for sure. Okay, we're going to go on to our last segment of the night. Oh no, that's from last week. Okay, so the sixth segment is supposed to be, somehow the article got screwed up there. The headline is California Governor Newsom expected to sign bill limiting police use of deadly force. Wow, that's awesome. But wait a minute. In typical Democratic politician tradition, that's a good word. In typical Democratic tradition, just like Lori Lightfoot, the headline sounds much better than what is actually going on. This is propaganda, not real change. The devil's always in the details. The big change is changing the word reasonable, what an average cop would think is reasonable use of force, to necessary. And guess what? In their infinite wisdom, the legislature didn't define what necessary is. They're going to leave it to the courts. Remember now, many judges are former prosecutors. So the legislature is going to leave it to former prosecutors to define what necessary means. This bill was so watered down, it's completely useless. Governor he shouldn't have signed it. He should have vetoed it. But this is typical coward, strong democratic tradition, politician tradition, for sure. This is all about PR. This hurts accountability. Because now Democratic candidates and lawmakers can say, look what we did. We don't need other reforms. We've just did this, even though it does nothing. This version isn't much better than if it was just police department policy they were changing. The cops didn't want the legislation. The cops, as much as cops, and here's a great sign, it's like a tell, here's a great tell about the propaganda around policing from cops. They always talk about how judges are so corrupt and horrible, blah, 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 blah. Well, then, cops and Fraternal Order Police in California there, when you were working in this bill, why didn't you define what necessary was? If you were so afraid of what the courts were going, how the courts were going to do it, because they're all filled with horrible judges. They weren't. They probably figured the only definition they were going to get was actually going to be against the police interest. So they left it undefined, knowing the judges would probably define it more on the side of police and less on the side of survivors and victims of police brutality. They knew that. That's why they left it. If they didn't know that, they would have defined it. They would have defined it themselves. But why have to worry about working on that legislation and a give and take process when you can just count on the judges to give you what you want? It's very hard to convict cops, right? Why do we want those people that are making it very hard to convict cops to define that what necessary means? This is a total capitulation. This is so the useless governor and the useless Democratic politicians can say they passed something and it looks good in the media. Nothing more. Nothing more. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Go to our website, chicagojustice.org, read the report about the Public Safety Commission. We will be back on Monday talking about the lack of what the Committee on Public Safety did today. It was great timing for our report because God, does that committee stink. But they just don't seem to care. Thank you so much, and we will see you Monday at 5:30 Central. Have a great day.